What's the silver bullet to sales, profit, business development, and marketing? Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Global Supply Chain Marketing Group, a professional development webinar series created specifically for supply chain professionals, brought to you by Supply Chain Brain Media. I'm Ralph Henderson, your host. Trust is the silver bullet, and today we prove it. How to build trust with strategic content. It's the first in our three-part series for marketing professionals across the supply chain industry, focused on developing trust through content, not the fluffy kind, the kind that creates business and sustains it. If there's one thing we all know, it's that trust has become the ultimate differentiator. Every company says they're innovative, reliable, customer focused, but in today's market, it's not enough to say it. You have to prove it. Think about it. When you buy something, whether it's a new CRM for your business or a car or even a home for yourself, you don't buy because of a promise. You buy because you trust the people behind the promise. You believe they'll deliver, and our customers are no different. Earning that kind of trust doesn't happen by accident. It takes intention, consistency, and content that does more than promote. It proves. Strategic, evidence-based content that shows why we're worth believing in, who we are, and what we stand for. And before we begin, a quick note. We'd love to make this conversation interactive, so feel free to drop your questions in the Q&A at the bottom of your screen anytime. We'll get to as many of those today live as time permits, and if we miss any, we'll follow up with you afterwards. Today, we're laying the foundation for all of this with somebody who's quite literally written the book on it, Melanie Diesel. She's a globally recognized expert on content strategy, brand storytelling, and truth-based marketing. So as we kick off this first episode, think about your own content. Are you convincing or are you corroborating? By the end of this session, you'll know how to turn your content into proof that earns trust, builds credibility, and creates lasting relationships. Melanie, it's great to have you with us.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
And for everyone who's watching and listening to this, our guest didn't come to us. We went to her because Supply Chain Brain Media is committed to bringing you world-class resources to help you grow professionally and personally. And in my 34 years in the industry opinion, we knocked it out of the park on this one. But hey, you don't have to believe my promise. I'll let you believe her proof. Melanie, it's all yours.
Awesome. Thank you so much. It's great to be here, Ralph. And I'm going to share some slides with you all as we walk through these things. I will be keeping an eye on those questions. So if you do have a question, please ask it in the Q&A module, and I'll do my best to answer it live. I would much rather you understand and be able to follow along with us than hold a question to the end and have it interfere with your ability to benefit from the things we're doing here today. So as promised, we're going to be talking about how to build trust with strategic content. And as Ralph was saying when he sort of kicked things off for us here, there are a lot of different things we pay attention to, right? In our space, there are so many things that we are trying to measure, right? We're trying to pay attention to, we're trying to track, we're trying to optimize everything from how many badge scans or visitors we're getting at the booth, right? How many new email subscribers. We're also looking at things like demos and calls that are scheduled. We've got a conversion rate, our deal size, our costs, right? There's a lot that we're paying attention to. But one of the things that I have found, and I think not enough of us realize, is there is actually sort of a super KPI, a key performance indicator, if you will, that underlies all of these. And that is trust, right? That is trust. And the problem, looking back at this list, we don't walk over to a booth that looks like it's full of people we can't trust. We don't sign up for an email list full of people we can't trust. We don't give our money over or sign a contract with or schedule a call or a demo with folks that we cannot trust. And so trust becomes one of the most important metrics we need to be paying attention to. And we'll talk today about how you can do that and how you can optimize what you're doing to create more trust in all of the things that you do. Because the reality is we're communicating with skeptics. Our audience does not trust us, right? There's data that comes out. The Edelman Trust Barometer comes out every single year, and the data is not good. I'll tell you that. It comes down each and every year. People are trusting less and less that the businesses they are communicating with, and that means all of us, right, have their best interests in mind and are on their side. And I can't really blame them, right? It's easy as a marketer. We know we're telling the truth. We want them to believe everything that we're saying, but we understand we're operating in a skeptical environment. I mean, just think about all the things that we are up against when it comes to seeming trustworthy. These same consumers that we're trying to reach, the customers and prospects we are trying to talk to, are getting inundated with untrustworthy content. They're getting filters on social media. We don't know if we can trust anybody's face anymore, right? There's Photoshop and deep fakes, and now we've got AI getting scary good at everything that it's trying to do to convince us. And I mean, take a look at your recent your spam filter folder in your email, or you've probably gotten a whole bunch of those robocalls yourself, and they always sound kind of like a human, but they give themselves away with their weird cadence, right? And they've all got the same script. So there's no surprise that our audience is skeptical and that we are operating in such a skeptical consumer environment. Now, the good news in all of this, that our communication isn't trusted, and no, that wasn't a slip. The good news is that we could see this as a problem, that nobody trusts us, or we can see it as an opportunity. And I choose to see it as an opportunity because here's the thing. If not every marketer knows this, if not every marketer knows that our audience is defaulting to skepticism and not believing the things we say, then we have an opportunity to differentiate ourselves by being the ones who earn that trust from a skeptical audience. So, what I want to talk about today is a couple different things. First, I want us to address, when does trust matter most in our communication? When does it matter most? When do we need to be thinking about implementing trust earning content in our communication? So we'll go through those 5 times when I have found, based on my work with companies, that earning trust is most important in these types of communications. And then I'm going to share with you the types of content that work really well to earn trust with your audience. So by pairing those things together, when trust is most important and how we can earn trust in those moments that matter, we are setting ourselves up for a recipe to earn the trust of the consumers in the moments that matter most. So that's what we're going to be doing today. Once again, please use that Q&A section to ask your questions along the way, and I'd be happy to clarify, give you specific examples, and make sure that you're getting everything you need to be earning the trust that your consumers need in those moments that matter most for you and your business. So these are the 5 moments that I have discovered. The 5 types of communication, the 5 message focuses where we find that trust is going to make the biggest difference for you and your business. So, the first one of these is convenience, and I'll walk through each of these, but just to give you sort of an overview, we're talking about convenience when things are easy, when we're talking about comparability, how things compare to one another, when we're talking about our commitments, things that we are committed to, when we're emphasizing connection, our connection to others in some way, and when we're talking about our own competence. Those are the times when proof will be most important and when trust is most relevant to the conversation. So let's walk through each of these in a bit more detail to help you get a sense of what this might mean for you in your specific business and the types of messaging that you put out. So the first being convenience. Convenience is any time that we are talking about how wonderful and easy our product is to use. So if you have messages now, I want you, as we're going through this, think about your product and service. Think about what it is that you are selling. And I want you to think, if you are making claims or having conversations with this type of conversation in it, this convenience messaging. If you are talking about how fast your product works, how fast it is to install, how quickly you can get started, how quickly it is to it can be implemented, your ease of use or compatibility, right? How many different software and tools you're compatible with or you integrate with. If you're talking about how simple starting is, right? Just kicking off, it's plug and play, or you set it up once and it's ready to go. Any of that kind of conversation is what we would call convenience messaging. You are messaging how easy your product is to use in some way, shape, or form. Now, this is a time here again, I like to remind people nobody is going to market with the message, our product is super slow, difficult to use, and will not be compatible with all of your other tools, right? Nobody's out there with that message. That means everybody is out there saying our product is quick and easy to use, quick to set up. It will work with all the tools you have. So we need to differentiate ourselves by adding proof, which we'll talk about again in a little bit. So this is convenience messaging. Anytime you're talking about how easy your product is to use. Now, I want to make note here, this happens at every level, right? So this could be the type of messaging that's happening in person, in conversation at the booth. This could be the type of thing that's happening in your email newsletter or your funnel as you're following up and engaging and managing loyalty with your existing customers. It's stuff on your website, on your packaging. I don't care where you're communicating. If you are communicating these types of things, this is where we're going to want to focus on implementing more trust proof, which we'll get to in a little bit. So think of those moments, flag those moments that you are using convenience messaging so we can talk about how to add proof in those environments. The next one is comparability. Comparability. Anytime we're comparing two things. Now, I want to note here, this sometimes trips people up. A lot of people say, well, we don't create content or make any claim. We don't even want to talk about our competitors. So we're not saying how much better or worse we are than any competitors. Why would we even want to bring them up? So I want to point out here, this includes comparability within your own product set. If you are talking about two different tiers of your software, if you're talking about two different types of products in your lineup, if you're talking about two families or groups of products, groups of services, you're talking about subsidiaries or different regions, it doesn't matter to me what you are comparing. You can also be comparing to the alternative of buying or doing nothing. That is also a comparison, right? So anytime you're having comparability messaging, that's a time when we want to focus on trust. So that includes these types of messages. When you're talking about the quality, our product outperforms, our product is better. Anytime you're talking about how great your product is, right? Which is a lot. This is one of those that we talk about a lot, maybe without even realizing it. When we are saying it's faster than something, right? So anytime we're talking about the quality of our product, also, anytime we're talking about the durability of our product, right? This is something that's going to last longer, or the results come faster, the effect lasts longer, right? This is your Energizer bunny, right? It keeps going and going and going, right? So durability is part of this conversation around comparability as well. And the last type of messaging that falls into this category that you may be making is any conversation or messaging around affordability. Affordability. So if you are saying this is a more cost-efficient solution, this is more budget-friendly, right? Whatever the messaging is you're using where you're talking about cost as a comparison, this is a space where you'd be falling into that comparability messaging that needs proof to earn trust. So we've talked about convenience, we've talked about comparability. Now, our next type of communication we want to be on the lookout for to add that proof is going to be commitment. Commitment. So when I talk about commitment messaging, what am I talking about? This is sometimes a little bit more abstract, right? The commitment that we are making talks about how important certain things are to us. This is a time for you to talk about your values. That could be your values and mission as a company, as an organization, or even as an individual. What's important to you? Honesty, sustainability, diversity, whatever it is that you are committed to and what you value, this is where that type of messaging is coming into play. So, oftentimes, and especially for a lot of us, this first comes up as a commitment to our consumers, right? Because nobody goes out to market saying, we don't value our consumers and we treat you like a number, right? This is not the messaging that anybody's taking to market. Everybody wants to sell a message, to share a message that says, we value you. We care about the problems that you're having. We care about providing you with a solution. We care about the relationship we are building over time and creating a long-lasting relationship, right? So we will see consumer commitment messaging in a lot of different communications. So that's something to keep an eye out for. This is something you hear with a lot of insurance companies, right? So Allstate is always saying, you're in good hands. We're going to take good care of you. We're committed, right? Nationwide is on your side, right? We have your back. We're here with you. We're committed and committed to our relationship with you. But this also counts for any broader commitments in your corporate social responsibility, or social good messaging. Any of those initiatives also fall into this category. So as you're thinking about any charity work, any nonprofit partnerships you have, any fundraisers. I mean, 'tis the season of food drives or back to school when you're putting together backpacks for your community, right? Any of those kinds of initiatives are going to be in this category of commitment messaging that shows what you care about. So that could be sustainability, diversity, equity, inclusion, equal pay, it could be your local community, it could be any of those things. This is where your values are on display. Now, I want to make note here that this is especially important for younger buyers. Younger consumers care more about these values than some of our older consumers. So, just a little flag for you to keep in mind if you're at the booth or you have a segment of your audience that you're addressing that you know happens to be in that younger category, that millennial, Gen Z, probably Gen Alpha. We don't have their data yet, but it doesn't typically go back down. So I think it'll continue to rise. Those younger consumers, if those are the consumers we're addressing, know that these kinds of communications and providing accurate proof is going to be most important. So we have convenience, comparability, commitment, and now connection. Connection. So commitment and connection are a little bit different. Just to point out that commitment is what we are doing, right? Like we are committed to these actions that benefit our consumers. We're committed to these actions that support our community. We're committed to changing our processes to be more sustainable. It's an action, right? Connection is about what you care about. So these can be exhibited and talked about in different ways, and that's why I mentioned both. They might both be part of your messaging, and I don't want them to get missed if they're framed a little bit differently. So connection-based messaging is where we get a more of an emphasis on relationships. So this is like you're talking about our customers stay with us a long time, right? You're talking about how long you have been in your particular area of the state, of the region, of the country. You're talking about your really deep personal connections to the people you work with. That could be your customers. It could be your community. It could be your partners, your vendors, your suppliers, whoever it is you're working with. It's that connection that it's a personal relationship. So again, if you're selling more personal services, it tends to fall more into this category because you are talking about it more as a one-to-one relationship. If you're a rep for a particular area, you may have more of this type of messaging that feels less like commitment and feels more like connection. They both are going to require that kind of proof. All right, and our last of the 5 categories of messaging types where trust is most important is competence. Now, this one is last, first of all, because it's kind of table stakes, right? Again, nobody goes out to market saying, our product is no good. We produce no results. Nobody goes out to market like that. Everybody is claiming that they can deliver results, right? So this, again, is an area where the ability to differentiate yourself, the bar is on the floor, right? Everybody is saying that they are going to deliver results. We can stand out by providing proof of that and not just saying it. So, a great example of the type of messaging, not in our space here, but just like in the broader world, might be the Verizon "Can you hear me now?" Right? That whole "Can you hear me now? Good. Can you hear me now? Good." That whole message was about the fact that you could rely on them, that they were going to show up, and their service was going to work in all these different areas. So that kind of messaging, whether it's a slogan or a campaign, or it's just everyday conversation at a booth in your email list, where you're talking about competence, is an opportunity for you to be adding in this proof and recognizing that you have a trust opportunity that you can capitalize on. So in addition to like reliability, this is a spot where you can also lean into experience or legacy. When Ralph was kicking us off, he mentioned his 34 years of experience in the industry. These kinds of conversations, there's a difference between experienced and 34 years of experience. That specificity of your experience adds to the trust, right? As you're putting together a bio, if your bio is listed on your team site, if you're introducing yourself to new reps, new prospects, new customers, consider what those different proof points are that you can add that showcase your experience and your legacy. So this is a space where these are the types of messages I want you to be on the lookout for. So again, You may have these kinds of messages at all levels of your business. These are the things that are going to come up, these messages in your day-to-day conversations, in the booth conversations. It's going to come up when you're in the contract talks. It's going to come up in your email, in your website, on social media, whatever is in your purview. I can guarantee that you are making messages, you are delivering messages and communicating in ways that touch on these different types of messaging. Maybe your major differentiator is around your price point, right? In that case, you'd probably have more of the convenience type messaging than maybe competence and not focused as much on legacy. If you are really going after market share right now, if that's the key push for your company, you're probably going to lean more into comparability type messaging for this period of time. There are all kinds of different instances where you might lean into one or the other. I don't care which one it is. I want you to be able to recognize that when your messaging dips into these topics, when you're talking about how convenient your product is, you're talking about how competent you and your team are, when you're comparing your results or your product or your service to others, when you're talking about your commitment to values and your connection to people, these are the times when your audience is most likely to be skeptical, and therefore you have the biggest opportunity to earn their trust. Hopefully you're all following along here so far. I'm watching, keeping an eye out for more questions to come in. Again, if you have a question, please do ask that in the Q&A module, and if we have time, we'll answer them as we go. But seeing that I don't see any questions that hold up your understanding of these 5 key areas where trust matters most, we're going to move on now and talk about how exactly, when we recognize that messaging, when we recognize those moments, how then do we translate that into content that earns their trust when the time is right? So again, if you want to increase trust in those types of messages, in those moments that matter most, you want to be able to prove it. That is what we're going to be focused on today, is how do we prove that we are telling the truth? Now, I like to say that evidence is the best way to do that. And I know it sounds kind of sterile. It sounds kind of like we're talking about a courtroom drama. So indulge me, if you will, for a second here. This is actually a great opportunity for you to lean into whatever CSI, NCIS, whatever your drama of choice, your legal drama of choice is. Put yourself in that mindset, because we are talking about evidence in the same way that they do. Evidence, by definition, is the proof intended to convince the judge or jury of the alleged facts material to a case. So, if our audience, our customers, our prospects, our longtime partners, if they are looking at our communication and deciding, do I believe this? Is this true? What's my verdict? How do I feel about this? We need to present evidence much like they do in a courtroom, because in a way, our brand is consistently on trial because we are always communicating to a skeptical audience. So we need to convince them of the facts material to our case, to show them that we are worthy of trust, that they should rule in our favor when they're making a buying decision, when they're making a commitment to work with another company, to partner, to sign a contract, to engage in that long-term loyalty that is so important to us. So what are the types of content that work really well as evidence? Well, there's 3 main categories. That is corroboration, which is saying, don't take my word for it, take theirs, and we'll give you lots of examples. There's demonstration, which is, don't take my word for it, check it out for yourself. And then there's education, which is saying, you don't have to take my word for it. Let me give you some more information to help you better understand this situation. So these are 3 types of content that focus on corroboration, demonstration, and education that are going to serve you best in those moments where you're touching on messaging that trust matters most for. Now, I want to give you guys an example. I think it's really valuable to look at examples outside of our industry, right? Because sometimes when we're thinking through examples in our industry, it's really easy for you to get into any preconceived notions you have about that particular company. Maybe you start comparing your budget or your region or your market share to the example we're talking about. Maybe you start thinking, how can I implement that for my company? So I have intentionally chosen an example that is outside of our space because I want you to put your consumer hat on as we're thinking about this. This is to help you put your shoes into the feet of a consumer, into the feet, not into the feet, into the shoes. Put your feet into the shoes of the consumer, wear that consumer hat, and see how you feel about these types of things so that you can then take that empathy and apply it to the messaging from the other side. So In order to do that, I need to introduce you to my friend, Kathy Reed. Now, Kathy Reed is a fantastic car sales professional who works at Family Ford Lincoln in Watertown, Connecticut, right? That's where I grew up. I don't know if anyone here is from Connecticut. If you are, let me know. I'll hook you up with Kathy. She's amazing. Um, But Kathy Reed works at Family Ford, right? And their whole brand has been built around we will treat you like family, right? Now, a lot of companies say that, right? I mean, Olive Garden, for one, when you're here, you're family, right? But a lot of companies say that we're going to treat you like family. My experience, and the experience of many others I have found, is that car salespeople are not typically seen as the most honest and trustworthy, which, as we've talked about, is a problem facing us marketers right now as well. People do not trust our messaging. So Kathy's up against much of the same challenges that we are, right? And much like us, she is also selling a big, a major purchase, right? We're talking about large amounts of money. We're talking about big, important decisions that people weigh over a period of time. We're talking about decisions that are really hard to take back, that can be a huge commitment on the behalf of the consumer. So while it's not our industry, I want you to think about the similarities because there's certainly some stuff that ports over here, and it serves as a great way for me to show you these different types of content. So, my girl Kathy. Um, so, when we're talking about corroboration again is you don't have to take our word for it. You don't have to believe the things we're saying because we know you don't. You don't have to believe the things we're saying. Take their word for it. And there's two ways to go about that. Much like in your favorite courtroom drama, you can rely on experts or you can rely on witnesses. So first, let's talk about experts. And again, we're going back to my girl Kathy at Family Ford. If you were to look at Kathy's website, you would see all of the indications that this is someone you can trust. They have pulled in outside experts, people like Dealer Rater, Car Gurus, Carfax, right? They've got all kinds of awards. They are showing that they've been Dealer of the Year, their customer satisfaction awards, top rated dealers, right? These are all expert indicators, a way for Kathy to say, look, you don't have to trust me that I'm amazing. You don't have to trust me that Family Ford Lincoln is going to take care of you because look, Dealer Rater is telling you, Carfax is telling you, Car Guru is telling you, our many awards and certificates tell you that we are the real deal, right? So you don't necessarily have to do these same kinds of things, but maybe you were one of the 100 great supply chain partners, right, for the Masters of Innovation. Maybe you have some other sort of certification or an award. Maybe you've got survey data that shows your satisfaction numbers, your average review or rating. Those are all ways for you to point to. You don't have to take our word for it. Here's some examples, okay? Sometimes I get a question here around, well, what if we don't have any of those awards? What if we're a new company, or maybe we haven't put ourselves up for it. We haven't been any of these kind of like awards or rankings. That is okay. You can point to general data that comes from experts about how important your thing is. So I'll give you a car example again, just keeping with getting out of your personal space here and thinking about it from a consumer perspective. Kathy could also say, look, it's important, data shows that it's important that your car dealer understands your day-to-day needs, and that's what we care about most. That's specific data. They're pointing to some sort of study by who knows who that backs up their case. You don't have to take my word for it that you should be treated like family. Here's some data that shows you that's the case. You may be able to do the very same thing in your space by quoting experts like authors, academics. You can quote research, studies. So even if you don't have awards, it doesn't mean that you can't bring in expert perspectives to back up your opinion. All right, so our first category again, you don't have to take our word for it, listen to the experts. That's the first way to go. But there's also witnesses, right? We know this from our courtroom drama. There's always witnesses who come in and tell us what they saw, what they experienced. So in our case, as marketers, we are looking for the people who can back up our claims that we're making about our own business. So, Kathy, as I said, Kathy surely says, I'm great. I'm a great car salesperson. And I have already told you that I think Kathy is great. That's wonderful. But having more witnesses creates a much better impact. So you don't just have me saying that Kathy is great. You've got all these other folks saying how wonderful she is. And I have spared the identities of strangers on the internet. I didn't want to expose anybody. So these are these are pretend. But if you go looking, you will find literally hundreds of 5-star reviews across Dealer Rater, across Ford dealerships, you'll find all kinds of amazing reviews that talk about how wonderful Kathy is and how she takes care of people and treats them like family. My favorite example was a review that someone left where they said, I had gone, car shopping and my baby fell asleep in her car seat in the back of the car. And so Kathy, rather than making this woman wake up her baby, mess up nap time, bring her inside, Kathy went back and forth and so had the woman park close to the front of the building. And she went inside and got the paperwork and brought it out and let her sign on a clipboard and went back inside and came back out. She must have made 20, 30 trips in and out of the building just to make sure that that baby could finish her nap and keep her nap on schedule. And that is the kind of example of saying, Kathy treats me like family is one thing, right? Kathy saying she treats you like family is another. But Kathy running back and forth to make sure that your baby finishes their nap on time and doesn't get woken up early, that kind of witness testimonial goes a lot further than just the details, right? So we can find those examples too. Find those customer stories, find those moments where people can share what a wonderful experience they've had with you and build that into it. Now that leads us into the next thing, right? So we have our corroboration. Don't take my word for it, take theirs, either experts who are already trusted on this topic or witnesses who have seen the truth of those claims. The next step is to look for demonstration, where you can say, you don't have to take our word for it. You check it out for yourself, right? One of the best ways to do this is by telling detailed customer stories. So while a witness report might just be like a quick one-off, a Kathy is great, here's a quick story. When we're talking about demonstration, we're talking about providing them with the information that is so detailed and so compelling that it couldn't possibly be made up, right? This is detailed information. So I have offered this. They have not taken me up on it yet. But if you were to head over to the website where Kathy was and they had taken me up on it, you might get to hear my customer story, which I will give you here yourself. So my mom first went shopping for a car by herself back in, I believe it was 1996. She wanted to look for a car on her own for the first time, and she had not had a good experience. She felt like a lot of the sales folks she was talking to were just not on the up and up, right? They were not being transparent. She felt like they were charging her more, that they weren't being totally honest. She didn't feel respected as a customer, right? So she followed word of mouth. Somebody said, you should go talk to Kathy over at Family Ford. She went over, she met Kathy, and Kathy made her feel like she was being treated like family, right? She was kind, she was giving, she was understanding, she was patient, and she didn't talk down to her. She really treated her with a lot of respect. And the wonderful thing is, when she did buy her car from Kathy, which was a pale blue Ford Escort, in case anyone's curious, that pale blue Ford Escort lasted a long time. And throughout the length of that relationship, although we had just bought a car and were not in the market, Kathy continued to stay in touch with us. She sent my mom a birthday card. She sent her a car-anniversary card every single year with a photo from the day we got the car at the dealership, right? The same kind of thing you do for family. She sent birthday cards and back to school congratulations for me and my sister. She had no stake in that, right? She was a car salesperson, but she really treated us like family. She gave us that experience, and she made it so that when the opportunity arose, we would know to go back to her because she would continue to treat us that way. So I was in my senior year of college. I was in a Dunkin' Donuts drive-through, about to drive my car 9 hours to my summer internship, and my car's transmission flat out. It wasn't the Escort, okay? It wasn't a Ford. I should have known. I should have known that Kathy wouldn't have led me astray, but I had a Chevy. My bad, you know. So this car dies. I have to go to this internship. I'm supposed to show up there in 2 days and get set up, and I have no car. So we call Kathy. Now again, it's been years. It's been years since we were her customers. She has, who knows? We call her up and she says, "Come over right now. I've got this figured out for you." She comes over, she manages to find a cheap replacement for not my car, but my mom's car. So my mom now gets a better car. She had them take my mom's then current car, she had them bring it in the back while we were distracted with paperwork and completely detail it so that I got the brand new car experience. Again, she already sold us that car. She has no need to do that. She took that car in the back and had it detailed so that I would get that new car experience, even though I was getting a hand-me-down. Right? That is the kind of family experience that Kathy brought to us. She treated us like family. She came in when we had an emergency. She helped us in an emergency, and she has never, ever let us down. Now, that's the difference between Kathy is great, right? A quick witness testimonial and a full story. You understand that this is a 25-year history of her constantly delivering on that promise to treat us like family, helping us in an emergency. And there's more. I could go on. I could tell you more stories about how Kathy has saved us in the clutch because as of right now, we can account at least 13 vehicles that have been purchased from Kathy stemming from that original interaction in 1997 when my mom first went there and met her, all because she fulfills that promise of truly treating us like family. So that is the difference between a quick testimonial, right? A quick witness quote, and then a full story, a full presentation of what that is like. So I want you to think, who are those people that maybe you've got quick quotes from them or you've shared them as a case study that you could go more in depth? Tell the story. What were they in need of? How did you help them? What did it mean that you were able to help them in the way that you did? Give them a more detailed story that really shows that experience. So you don't have to take my word for it when I say Kathy is great because now you understand the lengths that she has gone to take care of my family and you can determine, does that align with your values? Is that someone you'd like to work with? You don't have to take my word for it. You know the story and you can decide for yourself. We can give our customers, our prospects that same experience. So in addition to, you don't have to take my word for it, I've demonstrated it by giving you a story you can judge. We also have the option to give documentation. Documentation. So when I say documentation, this is where we can bring in things that allow them, again, to make their own choices. This is where we can show videos, where we're giving it side by side. This is where we can give them a checklist that they can use to ask the right questions. This is the before and after photos that we can show them of the difference that our product makes. Um, I like to call this the infomercial category, right? So any product you've ever seen in an infomercial, not unlike a booth environment, right? Not unlike a trade show or an expo floor, you see the side by side, the demonstration. I don't have to tell you that our mop is so much better because you're going to see me put this mop and another one through two identical puddles and see how much more this one happens to absorb, right? Those are the kinds of things that we see in the category of demonstration, where it's, you don't have to take my word for it that our product is incredible. Let me show you, let you judge for yourself, right? So think about the ways when you're saying how amazing your product is, when you're talking about how you're committed to these topics, how can you show them? How can you let them see it, hear it, smell it, taste it? How do you let them experience it themselves to come to that conclusion on their own? Because what we also know as marketers is that the conclusions our audience comes to on their own are far more compelling and far more deeply held than anything we could convince them of ourselves. So the opportunity to deliver content that demonstrates the truth of our claims instead of just saying it is actually creating much deeper trust than even anything we could create on our own. So that final category is education. Education. So again, we know our audience doesn't necessarily trust us, so we're going to try to corroborate by giving them experts and witnesses they can trust. We're going to demonstrate to the best of our abilities to give them deep stories that can resonate with them, and to give them the documentation, let them see and experience it for themselves, so they can come to that conclusion on their own. But the reality is, in many cases, we are talking about first-time buyers. They've never had to buy this product before. They've never had to make a decision that could be career-ending or career-making. They've never had to sign a contract of this value, right? We are talking about major, stressful, big decisions that we're talking about here. And so there is often a knowledge gap. And that knowledge gap happens for a couple of reasons. It happens because they're a first-time buyer. They've never done this before. They don't even know the right questions to ask, right? But it also happens because in many cases, our buyer and our end user are not the same, right? The buyer is making certain choices without knowledge of how the product will be used, how it feels, how it works. They are the buyer, they are not the user. And so there's a knowledge gap between what things are important here that should be factored in here, right? So this is where the ability to educate your audience comes in. This is where we can educate the audience, and we can do that in a couple different ways. We can do that by informing them, but first I want to give my own expert witness. I want to eat my own dog food here, right? You don't have to take my word for it. Maybe you trust Deloitte a little more than me. Maybe you've heard of them a little more than me. And Deloitte has plenty of data that has shown that developing content to inform and educate your consumers will help them move independently through the shopping journey and creates trust and increases their loyalty. right? So informing your customers, giving them information, helping them learn and educating them helps to create not only trust, but loyalty. And what else do we need in this business, right? But trust and loyalty. So again, you can do this two ways. The first way is by informing them, by giving them information. And this is one of the things that I love about Family Ford, and part of why we've continued to go there after we buy our car, because it's not always convenient to go back to the dealership for your repairs or your oil changes, but we keep coming back because they give us a different experience. This is what happens. So this is the quote from their website, just to quote them, not me. Our factory certified technicians send you a video showing exactly what's wrong and how we're going to fix it, making sure you understand every last detail before we do any work on your vehicle. Now, just to be clear, what I'm saying is the typical experience when you go to a mechanic, when you go to get your car fixed, is you give them your car, you sit in a really grubby waiting room for a while, and then they come out and tell you you owe them $748, right? Like that's the typical experience. And you don't know why. There's a bunch of line items for things you don't even know if you actually needed or if they're just pulling the wool over your eyes, right? That's not the case here. They will literally send a video. I have seen FaceTime style videos, right? Hey, do you see this filter here? You see how it's all gray? Here's what a new one looks like. This is what it should look like. It should be bright white, but this one is gray. That's what we want to update to give you the bright white instead. So they're showing you, they're saying, I don't need you, I don't need to believe that I need a new filter. I see it with my own eyes, and you've helped me understand why that's necessary, what the benefit will be to making that change. They're educating their customers every step of the way so that they feel comfortable with each step that you are going to take. Now, when we inform our customers, not only does it earn trust because it's harder, it's easier for us to understand what needs to happen, it also demonstrates your competence in the process, right? In order to teach me, you must know more than me. And so being able to demonstrate that expertise, that competence by educating your consumers creates this endless loop where you're demonstrating your competence and proving it. You're demonstrating it and proving it. It creates a loop that allows you to continue to educate your customers and build that loyalty. Now, in many cases, we're informing because we need them to have the information to make some sort of decision. But sometimes we also need to coach them, right? They have an action they need to take, and we need to show them how. This is a little more technical, right? And this is something that a lot of us are probably doing in more expected ways. We might have instructions, we might have FAQ pages, we might have a map showing how to get somewhere, we might have step-by-step support documentation or implementation guides, installation instructions. So this tends to be a little more typical, but the idea here is the same, right? Just because our buyer doesn't know how to install something doesn't mean it's not important for them to understand how it's going to happen, because they will make that purchase and that process will begin. So a lot of what happens is asking, okay, not only what does our customer need to understand, but what do they need to do? And if we can provide that information that guides them through what they need to do, we are helping them become more informed. We are helping them become better positioned to make a purchase with us, right? To sign on and do business with us. And again, we're demonstrating our competence at the same time. So this is really a win-win-win all around. So again, these are all those opportunities that you have. When it comes time, in those moments that matter most, when we're talking about convenience and connection and competence, and all of those moments where trust matters most, we need to be asking ourselves, how can I add proof to this communication? Can I corroborate what I'm saying? Instead of just saying something awesome about myself, my product, our results, can I corroborate it? Can I find experts who can back up what I'm saying? Experts that my audience might trust already. Can I find witnesses who have experienced the truth of that claim themselves? This could be customers, it could be employees, right? It depends on what exactly the claim is that you're making. But can I find those people who can attest to the truth of this so that it's not just me saying it, it's other people backing it up as well? The other question to ask yourself is, how can I show it? Instead of just saying it, how can I show it? If I want people to know that we're competent or that our product works really well, how can I give them a detailed story that lets them understand and actually feel that, right? Feel the truth of that claim. And how can I provide documentation that lets them like see it for themselves, right? Show us side by side, give us before and after, take us behind the scenes, let us see it for ourselves. And then the question is, what education do they need in order to trust me? Right? Because that's where there's often a gap. If they don't have enough information, they don't even know whether they can trust you. right? And so being the one who provides that information, who coaches them through those processes, whether they're physical processes like an installation or just abstract processes like deciding, right? Preparing. That information goes a long way toward helping them feel not only that you're trustworthy because you can provide this information and you're helping them understand it instead of just pulling the wool over their eyes, but also, again, demonstrates your competence right in front of them. They see that you know your stuff, that you guys understand their problems, you understand their needs, and you are showing up in a way that is going to help them get better results. So this is really the core of proving it. A lot of times people are wondering, like, how do we measure this sort of thing? And that's a wonderful question. Trust is such an abstract thing, and it's difficult for us to measure with, like, there's not a specific trust, indicator that we can point to. There's no single behavior that shows that people trust us. But what we do know is that when we are mindful of the fact that our audience doesn't trust us, when we recognize that every piece of communication we put out is going to be met with skepticism, and then we take an intentional effort to start layering this proof into our communication, positive results are found. That's what we see. And whatever those results are for you, I can't make that guarantee, but you should look at your KPIs and ask yourself, do they need to trust us to make this transaction? Yes. Do they need to trust us to sign on with us? Absolutely. Do they need to trust us to give us their email, to let us scan their badge and jump in our funnel and have that conversation on the expo floor? Absolutely, right? Trust underpins all of the other KPIs that matter. And so, when we make intentional effort to bring more proof into our content, we are making an intentional effort to raise the baseline trust level, and that can only have positive results for all the KPIs that flow from that trust. So, that's what you need to be doing, looking for those opportunities in all of your content to add more proof, to help build trust in those moments that matter most by corroborating, demonstrating, and educating your audience on all of the claims for your business. That is what I have for you today. I know we have some questions that came in, Ralph, and we can go through and answer those, but I don't want you to jump off without realizing that we're going to come back for another session. So you can scan that QR code you see there on the screen to come back for our next session in a couple of weeks. We're going to have even more fun talking about other parts of content too. So while we're getting those questions queued up and getting ready to jump in, scan and register yourself for part 2 in a couple weeks. What do you got for us, Ralph?
All right, you can kill the share
Yep.
and we will get right to it. First of all, if you feel like you've been drinking out of a fire hydrant for the last 45 minutes, that's by design, okay? One of the things that we did 2 years ago when we were doing the research for these series is we landed on, based on the request of the supply chain marketing professional, first session class, second session lab, third session case study or application. So today you got your class, and I tell everybody it's like fire hydrant training where you get more on you than in you, but it soaks in over time. So we're very aware of that. You can go back. We're going to send you an on-demand for this show. You can watch it as often as you want. You can certainly share it with some people, but there was some really, really good information here. And we've got some really great questions. And as we get into that, we're talking about things that's near and dear to this audience, Melanie. So, you talked about the case studies or having clients. And one of the things that we have found at Supply Chain Brain and Supply Chain Brain Media, that's one of the most powerful ways you can go to market when somebody's looking for your stuff, is to have a case study that has a client, preferably a brand client, but any client really is good for that. And I think this audience gets that. And one of the things, before we dive into the questions, I have to tell you, one of the best demos I ever saw was years ago. There was an order fulfillment company that was talking about semi-automated technology where they were using electronics to pick products out of shelving. And they set up a demo in the booth where they would have the person that would be putting the system in on the technology side of the demo, and then they would have their boss on the manual side, and they
Mm,
had a race. and they,
So
inevitably the
good.
boss lost miserably. But it was
Yeah.
great. It was like one of the most effective demos because, to your point, it showed this is how we're currently doing it. This is how we could do it, and
Yeah.
what would it mean for us? So, these are things that we want this audience to make sure they're definitely thinking about. As far as what you went over, which again was a lot of information, and we realized that, and you were talking about all five of these claim types, which is really fantastic. The first question from our audience is it bad if our marketing doesn't have all five of the claim types?
Yeah, I hear this question a lot. This is actually not something to be concerned about at all. It's natural and normal and honestly preferable that your messaging would flex depending on what your focus is at that time. So I think I gave a couple examples, but one of them being like it really depends on what your core differentiators are. Sometimes your core differentiator is that you do the same thing as the competition, but you do it cheaper and faster. And if that's the case, then convenience is where you want to be. That is what you want your messaging to focus on because that's your key differentiator in the space. You'll probably have comparability in there as well because you'll be comparing to the alternatives. But it just really depends on your business and your differentiators. And it depends on what your focus is right now. If you're on a campaign to steal market share, then you're probably having more comparability conversations than anything else, right? If you are maybe you're in reputational repair mode, you're going to be having a lot more conversations around commitment and connection, right? If you're going through like an acquisition or a merger or something, you're probably having more of those commitment and connection conversations. So these types of communication will come up in various percentages depending on what your most important communication is at that time. So don't feel like it's a check the box, you must have all five or that they must be in equal measure. That's more just to help you understand when you see those types of messages, any of those five, that's a good time for you to think about proof because trust is going to be really important.
Right. And this sequence is perfect because now that you've told us that, the next question is what kind of claims should I prioritize?
That's a good question. Yeah. So I think the question is going to be you want to kind of back up and think like, what is the most important thing my audience needs to know or understand to do business with me or to overcome whatever that present challenge is? And that's where I would focus, right? So again, this often comes down to like your key differentiator. What's the one thing they need to know to come see our booth instead of another or to sign up with us instead of another, to do our demo instead of theirs? Whatever that key differentiator is, that's where I would be focused, right? If the thing is we have way more experience, lean into competence, right? If the big difference is, look, we are a smaller company, we can give more hands-on service, we have more of that personal connection, lean into connection. Look at whichever one is going to help them make that leap to be your ideal customer. What do they need to know or believe to do business with you? And I would focus on that one first.
Right. Here's one that I actually really like. It's because we deal in abstracts so much in
Yeah.
marketing, right? You have marketing, you have business development, which now you start getting into the transaction. You have measurables and metrics. You have sales, obviously, that's the transaction everybody wants to measure. But when we go all the way back up to marketing, the question is, how can we provide proof of commitments that are more abstract?
This is a good one. So, obviously, if you're trying to demonstrate like how, like you said, how quick and simple a product is, it's very easy to set up that side by side of like manual versus automated, and you can
Right.
clearly see that one is different, right? Um, but if you're talking about something like company values, right, like sustainability or I don't know, your hiring practices, that it's a good place to work, like those things tend to feel a little harder to give visual proof of, which makes
Right.
total sense. They're not as visual in nature. So that's where I would rely more heavily on experts and I would rely on witnesses because telling those stories is going to be what makes the big difference. If you're able to, I don't know, if you're saying it's a good place to work, right, or that it's a good place for families, that you really support the families of your employees, for example, then that might be something that you can tell through stories. Where's the employee that has been with the company for X period of time that you stuck by their side when they were sick or their spouse was sick or, who knows, when the tornado took their house down, like whatever it is, find that story that demonstrates the way that you stood by them, your commitment to your employees, and have them tell that story because it's going to do a better job than trying to like just say like, oh no, we definitely stand by our employees, we support them. So look for the stories for like the people and have them be the subject, right? In those cases, you're often better able to just communicate that commitment. If the commitment does relate to an action, like if it's sustainability related, I have seen some really cool behind the scenes content that does a wonderful job where someone will say, look, here you're inside our factory. This is how minimal our waste is. Look at this. And like, here's what the average amount of waste from this particular process would look like. Here's the cast offs from like, a typical experience. Or here you can watch our waste actually going through the recycling process and being put back in, and we're using it for the next round, right? So showing them behind the scenes when the action isn't something they'd normally see can sometimes be a good way to demonstrate that kind of commitment.
Yeah, and this is amazing. This is why we do these webinars, the professional development. And I'll say I promise versus proving it, but I promise you, I just thought of this as Melanie was talking. So
Yeah.
we often think of case studies as customer case studies, and those are powerful. You need to have those. But what about cultural case studies, like inside of the organization? And
Yeah.
then finally, yeah, finally, why can't we have community case studies where we're doing things inside of the community? So these are all different things that we can do to impress upon our market. Again, like we said at the very beginning of the show, why they should even think about doing business with us. What do we stand for? Who are we? No, this is really good. And sadly, as always, we always run out of time on these things way too soon. But I know the audience has other things, and I want to be sensitive to their time. But before we let them go, Melody, since this is a marketing audience, what is the memory hook and what is the action item for this particular webinar, part one, that you want to give our audience?
So if you walk away with nothing else, I want you to remember that your audience does not trust you. And I know it sounds depressing. I know that's sad, but it's a good reminder that every time we're putting together an email, packaging design, a booth, we're putting together a banner or, a stand up, our audience is not going to believe things just because we say them. There was a time when they would, but they don't anymore. So
Right.
anytime you're putting a message together to share with your audience, remind yourself, they don't trust this. How can I prove it? If you can have that question in the back of your mind and remember, it's your opportunity to corroborate that claim, to demonstrate that claim, or to educate the audience so they understand it, you will be in a much better place to earning the trust that you deserve.
Excellent. Wow, that's fantastic. And remember, this is part one of three. And as Melanie said earlier, this is the QR code for part two. We're going to be talking about engagement, whether you are somebody who is married or wants to be married, or connected to it in any way, you know how important engagement is. It's also important in business. So we're going to talk about that in session two. And until then, thank you again for being here. Melanie, thank you so much. And for the rest of you, remember, we want the next 12 months to be your best year ever. Have a great day, everyone.